There you go. The little announcement saying we're live. We also go on the first come, first order here as opposed to Mondays where I tend to I tend to push all the Suffolk people to the end. So Quentin, you're the first rectangle.
Let me see. What is my rectangle going to say today? I was thinking one thing is we're going to try to. Oh, hold on. Can we actually come back to me? I might have to take this call. Sorry.
All right. We'll flip around. And now we have a test to see in the video if Quentin's name stays up there on the thing. So this is perfect. It was perfect.
Well, he actually has to speak, I think. No? Oh, maybe
No,
not.
because it does gallery view when it does the broadcast.
Ah, okay.
I don't know if that means you're done with your call, Quentin, or if you're still.
It was a wrong number, it turned out, but I just saw like the area code. I know my school has been having some problems with coverage problems. So I was a little worried it was that. I didn't want to miss that call. If it
All
was.
right. Then if you're ready to go, it's still yours.
So as I said Monday, I just finished up a bunch of integration of some generative AI features into the assembly line toolbox, which I think was great. Those are pretty well defined. And before I switched to that, I had been working on some features for the Weaver to integrate some of our generative AI stuff from our most recent paper. I think I will go back to that and try to figure out how to make them small scope changes because they started to spiral out a little bit as I was working on it. I don't want to make it a really hard thing to review, and we're losing Bryce, so it might just mean me having to do a lot of testing before I merge something there as well. So basically what that means is integrating the auto drafting feature to let you upload a Word document at least and get without any pre-labeling done and get to a draft of an interview that you can use in and keep tweaking in the Weaver. And the reason why it's kind of spiraling out a little bit is because as soon as you say we have an auto-generating feature that we really want to be useful, you have to have really good editing features, and the Weaver has been pretty linear. And it's not so easy to make edits or changes in the Weaver to the things that come from the automatic drafting. So I've been working on that a bit, and I just need to, I think, look at it again and scope it so that it's easy to make each of those changes as small as possible. But it'll probably still be a big kind of gnarly thing. And maybe one way to deal with that is to like have a alpha version of the Weaver that's installed separately that we use for a little while. I know for our students, my seminar, they won't be using it for several weeks. Our students in the clinic, I don't know if many of them are in that stage where they're using the Weaver for something, but we can communicate with them directly. So not sure the way to go there yet.
Where are you talking about editing the YAML once you've done the Word, or are you talking about editing the Word of the in the auto draft?
So one thing that I was playing around with is, okay, if you want to make it generate an interview for you, you can't really expect GPT 3 or 4 to be that smart about how it deals with the variables. So some will come in and it will say like username, but we want to replace that with a question that uses our name fields function, for example. So I started to be like, oh, we should make that its own variable type, a name fields question, and have that be a type you can choose from the dropdown list when you go through the Weaver that's automatically rewritten to look like it calls the name fields method rather than literally saying user underscore name in the output. That was like one little change. So that's like a new capability of the Weaver to have more flexible fields in that way. Another change is if you tell it to assign the fields to screens, right now you can't easily move a field from one screen to another.
Yeah.
So I feel like that feature is not really complete if we say it's automatic drafting with review, if you can't actually make that change until you go into the YAML file. I think, so that's kind of where I am, trying to figure out how small it can be to be helpful, so that it can be reviewed more easily and have more assurance before it's merged. But it's a big change in some ways, even though the feature is pretty discrete when everything goes perfectly. But the thing is, I don't think it's useful until you have ability to react to the things that gets wrong.
I see you.
Gonna be cool when it all comes together.
Yes. Yeah, it should end up being really helpful for people, I think.
And Quentin, you did that, when you did the demo, you did it for the Monday meeting, not a Friday meeting, right?
Yeah, this Monday I demonstrated
Right.
the
So,
toolbox stuff you can use in the assembly line. Not in
yeah,
the Word.
yeah. So I'm thinking when you get to the point, it would be cool to demo. It would be cool to demo it on a recording. That's all. Unless you just put that in the documentation, but I think that really helps when you show it.
Absolutely, I think you're right. That's a good idea.
All right. Matt,
Thanks. All right, so I first had a question. This is more of a user-ended question, a user of assembly line, is that I think over time, some of the dependencies of the different assembly line packages have been built into them, so I don't need to update assembly line and toolbox and Kiln and all those different things separately. And I also know that the AL dashboard does a good job of scanning and saying, oh, look where you are, let me help you with figuring out what you need to update. But I was wondering, just at this point, what are the best practices for keeping the assembly line packages up to date? Or does it depend on, should we continue to go package by package depending on what functionality is there, so we don't inadvertently change something before we're ready to test it?
I think we had a recent dependency issue because OpenAI released a stable version of their API, and we have some stuff that depended on it. And then we also had some other things break for our existing AI functions that are getting replaced by the OpenAI stuff. So that's a bit messy. I know people had some questions about that on Teams, but mostly those weren't things. That was like the dashboard PDF functions were broken by that. And then I think the Weaver auto drafting stuff might have been affected by it too. I would say, like, in terms of what best practices are, stay up to date with the latest assembly line. I would say that we try really hard to avoid breaking changes there. And for the other packages, they might just be updated as you need them and you see something from the changelog. But again, try to stay. I would say if you look at the changelog and nothing says it's going to break your experience, you should probably upgrade pretty much right away, because we're pretty good at testing those and have like a unit test in place. I don't know if anyone else has other ideas, Bryce or Michelle, to add to that.
Not really. It kind of depends, unfortunately, on your needs. So, like, if you have very specific needs for a package and it needs to be at a certain version and you want to make sure it absolutely is solid, then that one you have to be more careful about. And if other ones, it depends on your environment and what those needs are. If everything else being equal, like Quentin says, update to the latest and that kind of thing. Though I think also if there's a necessary update for something like security, that would be in the changelog, right?
We're also more likely to directly tell people to upgrade for security.
It's true.
Like we would bring it up in the
Yeah.
Monday meetings and stuff.
Before
if
we
there
just
was-
have a release announcement.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And probably that kind
But
of
like
thing.
like the latest toolbox, it had we haven't done too many like major version number changes, but do you know under like the format of a change of a version number? This is maybe a good
Do you,
example.
do you know
Sorry.
SEMBR, which is a version number convention?
So we went from version 0.9.2. Anything in the last significant digit means it's a pretty small change that you can safely update without having, maybe it adds something new, but probably it's just fixing functionality. It should almost always be safe to upgrade. It's a really hard line between what's a major version number change and what's a minor version number change. But we certainly aren't going to release a new or changed feature with this patch version number. So we went up to 0.1. That means from 0.9. That means you should look at it closely. And there are some changes here that would change the appearance that are highlighted. So we have some new compatibility with dark mode. So if you had custom CSS styles and you didn't turn off dark mode, you might see differences there. And if you're using the AL income list, there's a change. If you're using display template, there's a relatively significant change from blue underlines to green dotted underlines. So I would look at the version number as a clue as well. Anytime it goes up in this second number grouping, you want to look a little closer at the changelog.
I don't think the version number is as significant, mostly because half of our things are still at 0 dot whatever, and that they probably shouldn't be. They should probably all at least be on version 1 because we're all using them in production. But also the fact that like the things you like, technically the minor patch, like the middle number patch, is for like, it's supposed to be for like new features and stuff, which ideally, if you're like, a new feature shouldn't break existing features unless there was like a refactor somewhere in there, but that like those can come in anytime. And so I think it's really my go-to would be go to the release page, which was like that page that Quentin was just on. And I try to be good about like having things that are changed specifically under that changed heading. I think sometimes GitHub defaults it to just what's changed is like everything. And that's, you might have to sort of read a bit more closely there if that's the case. But otherwise you can just skim through and be like, oh, changed, this is going to be different for me, as opposed to like added or fixed. Fixed is we're pretty confident that like that was a bug. That's not going to be something that you were intending to happen. So that's my take, is just look for changed in the release notes.
That's fair.
And just to make it explicit, when it's a 0 point, etc., that's in beta version, and so that middle number becomes a bit more important. That's where the like also more major changes can happen when it's in beta. And when you're at a number point, like a positive number, I don't know, 0 is a weird number. Anyway, 1 point, 2 point, etc., the changes that happen in that first number generally mean something is breaking, meaning some functionality of yours is going to be different than it was before. And for a lot of my library, I think we all work very hard to not make changes that are not going to be backwards compatible. But for things like AL Kiln, if it's not going to be backwards compatible, then we're, not too shy about just switching to the next major version so people can stick with what they're comfortable with. But oftentimes those versions are ones like if we're going from 1.0 to 2.0, we're not going to be doing a lot of support for 1.0. So the new updates are going to be happening in the 2.0 branch, 2.0 version.
And
I think it's fair to say we try to match these standards, and we can be a little fuzzy, but I think the key is look at the changelog. But if you're having like a particular pain point, you should also let us know, and we can figure out how to change that.
And also we, like Bryce said, we say in the channel, like we're very communicative about the things that are going on with the libraries. I think we try to be.
Yeah, so I was going to say that I feel like the summary of all of this is I think the dashboard tool is still really good for just like knowing when there are new versions of things, so you don't have to manually visit 3 different pages. And then once you get your list of, oh, there's been a new release of toolkit and dashboard or something, go to those GitHub pages, go to the tags or like the tags. It's like the tags button on the thing, but then you immediately click on releases. I don't know why there's not a direct release button on the GitHub front page. But and then just scroll through and look for the changes and stuff.
If you want to
That's
be
it. That's
diligent
great.
about it, if you want to look for that extra information, that's where it's going to be.
Okay, no, that is helpful.
Sorry, that went
Um,
on probably a lot longer than you planned, but
No, it's good. It's
Yeah.
touched on a number of things that we have been looking at and thinking about, so it's good to get confirmation of those. One thing I wanted to say about the AL toolbox, we're typically only so far including the phone number validation YAML, because we use that in all of our programs. But I'm wondering, is there a different YAML we should be pointing to pull in more, or is it fine to just use this one if that's all we're relying on at this point?
Everything in the tool, that's the phone number thing that you mentioned is, I think, one of the few things in the toolbox we don't import by default, but every other, I don't think you need to directly import
Actually,
other
I'm not
things in the tool.
sure. We might even include that one now because I think we did.
What do we do now?
At least we had
Assembly line?
an issue for it. I thought we did say we were going to use it. It was stable enough for us to start using.
I think it might still be an issue because I did a search on it
Oh, okay.
yesterday and I don't remember seeing it, but
We haven't
I could have
actually
missed it too.
Got it.
Well, yeah, it will eventually soon be included by default anyway. But a lot of the other stuff in Toolbox are things that are in assembly line, like the drop downs and I'm blanking. There's the dates, like the 3-part
dates,
date
yeah.
selection. That's all stuff that's in the toolbox
Yeah.
that is just in your
In-
code by default. So
What we could be better at is anytime we bump a version of the toolbox to also make it the newest version of dependency of the assembly line, or I don't know. I'm just curious. We've sometimes debated if it is a helpful separation, but I think we kind of landed on a pretty small number of core packages. So I think we're actually in pretty good shape there for how we've decided to break those up.
that's not a bad idea. At least
Yeah.
like a new things that change in the toolbox should be a new assembly line release, because we do generally like use that stuff in assembly line pretty strictly. And
But
I don't
maybe
think
for
it's
things like the CSS changes we recently made, I guess theirs aren't really requirements in the same way. But if we had a change to like the API of a particular function that we use, then we obviously do have to increment the version number and pin it.
I think to address your like the little question you asked, you can include what you want to include and not include. There's no like there's no like hidden gotchas if you include one thing and don't include another thing. I believe they're all pretty independent. So and pull in what they need anyway, right? So I don't think there's any danger to that if that's what you're asking about, or there's certainly more tools we use, but you don't have to use them.
Yeah, I guess I forgot about all those other things that we are using that are maybe in the toolbox and pulled in automatically. I guess that part of it is just me wanting to keep our list of includes clean. And if the phone number validation will be pulled in automatically by including the assembly line, then we don't need to list that separately. Because I know now that you bring it up, there are numerous things that we're pulling in from the toolbox and assembly line automatically. So, all right, well, I'll just keep an eye out. We'll continue to include it, to specify that we're including that for now. But then once it's pulled in, then maybe we can clean up our include list a little bit. All right, add a couple of other items. I hope won't take quite so long.
We
I
flag
used
it back because we've got 6 minutes on the clock before I have another meeting. Other people can continue after that, but
Oh, sorry. Well, I don't know if there are things you need to, or if anyone needs to bring up something that David needs to be involved in, go ahead.
I don't need to be involved in much.
No.
I
right.
just trying to, it's a little tighter touch point on Friday.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, we
right.
we took it off into a deep discussion. Sorry. This is
Oh,
not your fault, Matt.
It seemed useful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So if you just
okay.
flag those areas real quick, and then we'll just loop through and loop back.
Okay, I'll just say I had a question about using the review answer generator in the dashboard. I just ran into, it looked like there was a limit because I gave it a whole big YAML, and then the document it produced did not include answers for all of the files. So I don't know if it was my YAML was too long, or I did something wrong, had too many tables. I don't know what it was, but I was surprised by that.
Kind of like a 9,000 line YAML before, and it worked.
Yeah, there's no explicit limit there. So if you want to put there is some filtering of like a few different fields. Like I think we might exclude like names and stuff, and maybe certain users, I think. I don't know for sure. But essentially we aren't like making review sections for every single thing that, like every single question that you have, only certain like new things that are like, this is a variable that isn't defined in assembly line. So if you wanted to send that on Teams, we could probably take a quick look and see, and could we be able to tell like, oh, this is what's getting filtered, this is as expected, or like, oh yeah, we're filtering too much. There's no hard like line limit though.
Okay. It may have been the filtering then, because maybe I looked at a bunch and then I hit on one that was filtered out, and I thought, oh, it just cut it off. But then I didn't go beyond that to see maybe it had the other ones. So, all right, great. Then the other issue was Sarah Song at the AOIC was just asking for any developments on Suffolk's staffing of other people in the post-Bryce world. So if there's any information on that to share, she would love to hear it, and I'd be interested in it as well.
On that post particularly, we're waiting for some communications to be back and forth with LSC. So I think things at a end of the year, they got some stuff right before the holidays and said, oh, we'll get back to you after the holidays. So that's where we are with that. We are about to have we anticipate having our new hire. That's not the replacement for Bryce's technical role, but the other edition coming online very soon, though. I'm very excited about that.
Okay, great. Thanks. And I'm too sad for words to see Bryce moving on, but very happy for you. It's good. You're going to be great wherever you go. And thank you. You've done so much for us. I'm really proud of what we built together. So thank you.
Thanks.
Here, here.
I am proud of it too.
Wait, I got to do reactions here. There you go.
All right, I'm done. Thank you.
All right, Vivian.
Oh, yeah, I think you're muted.
Sorry, how embarrassing for me. So I have been working on the name change for a minor program that I believe I mentioned on Monday. And something I have encountered is I wish there was a way to use a loop for generating attachment template files. So as it is currently, the court forms allow for up to change the names of up to 12 children, but each child requires a child information sheet. And I find myself wishing that there was a way I could just have one attachment block that loops rather than having to make one for each child. And I don't know if there's a viable way to make that happen in DocAssemble or not.
There is. Trying to think if there's any open source programs that I've worked on that use that
You
feature.
made you made an issue, or sorry, you, Quentin, made an issue on a similar line about how the bundle isn't quite like gathering things correctly. Which I think if fixed
Maybe was it related?
would be a lot, would be sort of essentially what you're asking, Vivian, of you could gather everything. See it, David. Like you could gather all of the individual documents that you needed to. So I would say yes, that would be a thing we could do, is just sort of also open work that we would need to
Do you remember what issue it was, Dave or
I
Bryce?
had 805.
805. Okay.
I'll send the link. Sorry, I have it.
Got it.
Just
I
on
don't
my
just
way
know
out.
the
Bryce,
issue.
you're the best.
Yeah.
I'll see you intermittently.
Yes. See you there.
Yeah, I forget why that was there. I know I've made some interviews where they're for like private clients where like we needed to make items for the client and their spouse. And we used some looping features there to do that. It's a little bit more advanced. I think the key thing is like we always show in all of our examples for the items that are in a bundle, we always show it as though it is defined when you initialize the object, but you don't have to. It's just a list. So any way you can think of getting the items into the list, you can do. And
Okay.
I think that's what this issue 805 is talking about. Yeah, that's Bryce, you're right. It does still relate to this. So it doesn't really work if you try to do it in another object block. It has to be in that. It can't be in a separate code block. It kind of has to be in the object block. So what I usually do is a list comprehension, something that, let me see if I can make an example here. You can see I'll just write it out so you can see it as I'm doing it. Something would be like AL user bundle. It's going to be a document bundle. And you can indent it, which I find is helpful. I think you have to still define the elements when the bundle is created. This is what that issue that Bryce pointed out was talking about. But it could be dynamic. So here I could do it like item for item in children, like maybe item dot. What did you say it was? Information sheet?
I think I have it as child underscore information. But yeah.
So that could be your definition. And then you could have a definition like this for what is, child.information sheet. Could be like this. That makes sense. And then you'd have the attachment would be like this.
Okay.
I think that would have to be like that, right? Because I think the information sheet has multiple versions. Yeah. So you'd have to have that second loop index. So something like that code. I'm only sharing my screen this way to get it on the recording would do what you want. Maybe we should put an example like that and document it. Matt, I see you have a question.
Yeah, this is great. One of the issues that Vivian and I ran into was then within the attachment block, we're using a lot of indexed variables in the specific form fields, and we wanted to, and maybe just by doing I would be enough to always use whichever I guess index we're going through at that point. Maybe that's
Yeah.
okay.
The variables I and J are going to be defined in the template. So if you can use those index variables in the template too, it's going to be aware of those. So
can
you could
also
say, go ahead.
I was gonna say you can go really deep with index variables, and so if you have like other, I don't know if this is what you're asking or not, but like if you have I and J there, like DocSimple goes, it's looking at the documentation, it goes all the way to N, so you can do like K. If you're like nesting another thing, it would be like K, L, M, and N. I don't know if that's what you're asking or not.
Yeah, well, yeah, that is some. So the next one would be, we could just use K, and it'd be like I could do children sub I dot whatever parent sub K, and it would know, it would do parent 0 then for that. That might be,
Yeah, you could do that, exactly. And also, I think it's probably really important to say here, you could combine this. So this could be a list of always needed doc 1, and then always needed doc 2, whatever, right? So you could have 2 lists. You could have, now the one thing that's kind of annoying, which is solved by that issue 805 that Bryce highlighted, thank you for that reminder, is like you can't really, it's going to be painful. Like all these have to all be 1-line expressions. Like not literally on 1 line, but they have to be understandable as 1 line in the way Python reads the
there is,
information.
well, I was gonna say I
No, we
have
fixed the bug.
a workaround that I'm realizing that I actually did in the appearance. Is you can make, it still has to be like when you make the bundle, you have to have a single list of things, but that list can be some other Python variable, and then you can define that variable in a object in a code block somewhere
That's
else.
a very good
You,
point.
you
You're
can
right.
make an intermediate variable and it's not going to need to, just remember that it's not going to update. Is
Yeah,
the
you
main
have
thing.
to say the rules to update it.
Yeah, I
At
just sent
least.
I just sent the link. Yeah, it's not going to update. That's the only part. But I did send a link of what that looks like in the appearance right now. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Quentin, you have, the only thing I'm confused about is in your editor, you have red closing brackets, but the first one is orange. Is that,
Yeah.
is your code editor, it's not telling you there's why are they different colors?
Well, it's trying to use YAML parsing rules here.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't know this is a valid
Okay.
Python code. I think this is the right way to write this. At least I like to write it so it's
don't-
easier to read on multiple lines.
Can you
think
do that on
something-
multiple lines in YAML?
Yeah, there's at least some times where it just works. I know I've
Okay.
done these bundle definitions on multiple lines. Let me see.
Cool. Okay.
I did that on up to code. So I can probably find that.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, if you've done it before, I always just do the pipe where anytime I have a new line, just because I'm scared and I don't know what the YAML rules for new lines are.
It's a bit confusing. You need at least 1 level of indent, I think. Whereas like normally I would have this go back to the beginning of this line. You can't do that. Maybe this all has to be indented a bit more. Let me see if I can find it, because I know I have it in the housing code checklist somewhere.
In the meantime,
Yeah.
yeah, does this start to cover what you're asking?
I think so, yes. I'm gonna have to
Right.
try it out, and if I get it to work, I should be able to make this program much easier to maintain and
Yeah.
be a bit shorter
Mm.
also, which would be nice.
Do
Vivian,
you
have you
have-
got it on GitHub now?
The version I have on GitHub, I don't think has that set up yet. I haven't pushed a commit in a little bit. I am in the process of setting all this up, so I
Well,
don't have an active commit.
That'd be
With
cool.
I do with not with that, these sheets anyway.
Okay.
I think Melissa would, once you get this working, I think this would be really helpful for Melissa, who's doing an incredibly complicated domestic violence thing here in Alaska as her first project.
I still can't believe, yeah, what, I'm not
Well,
gonna,
people don't know. I mean, people just don't know.
it's true, it's true.
So
Um,
here's an example of the indentation that's worked for me before. So I just as a to answer that question, Bryce. So I guess it just needed one indent further, and then you could just kind of use normal Python rules as long as there's an opening element on the previous line.
Okay, that's cool.
that is interesting.
Yeah,
Just
those
as a person
indentations
who's
get me
building a
all the-
schema for this kind of stuff. That is interesting.
Mhm.
Well, you should see how docassemble parses it. If it just says this is a string, maybe
Yeah,
maybe the YAML rules are what are saying. Look on the next line if there's an open
okay,
bracket. In that case, it might just let YAML parse it and then do with it what YAML says it is.
yeah.
I don't know for sure.
Yeah, it's worth taking a look. Wild. Uh, oh, s- I don't mean to take over. I just, Vivian, did you have anything else? And then I'll let
No,
someone
that
else
was all
take
that I
over.
had.
Okay. I don't remember who's next. Couldn't, and I'm also not David. Does anybody want to take over?
Why don't we jump to Caroline?
I'm still working on comparing the HTML with the docx, but for some reason I can't get all of the HTML templates to expand. And I can't figure, I copy and paste, I look at the ASCII codes and I don't know, is that a
So I
thing?
messaged you in Slack
Oh,
to
sorry. I'm
reply
not
to that. That's okay. So what I suspect is happening is that the timing is off because it takes a while for the thing to expand, for which I have two suggestions. One, expand from the bottom to the top, and then they won't interfere with each other, I think.
Sorry, what do you mean expand from the bottom to the top?
Click on the bottom ones first.
You mean put the code that says tap at
Yep.
the top of the test?
No.
Oh.
When you list out what to tap, it taps them in the order you list them. So start to list step 8 first, then list step 7, then list step 6.
That's what I just said.
Oh, I thought you meant putting it at the very top of the test. I misunderstood. Sorry.
I'm still not right. You still have to do the table.
Yes.
Right.
And then
And
do
then
that.
when you say, and I should see, and I
Yeah.
tap on, you're saying reverse the order of those.
Yes.
I see.
think
Okay.
that will help. And if that doesn't help completely, then adding a pause of like half a second or something between taps will also help because the text is expanding.
Okay.
So,
All right, I'll try that then.
but I think the faster version will be to tap in
Yeah, okay, I'll try that. That
the
makes sense.
order. Okay.
Because I thought I was doing something, it's
Well, it pretends to be a human, so it's looking for stuff on the page and it doesn't just like, it actually clicks on something. So it tries to aim, but if it's aiming at a moving target, it doesn't
Yeah.
know that.
right. Okay, I'll try both of those and see if those help.
Yeah, that's just how Puppeteer works. So,
Okay,
okay.
that's me. That's all I was struggling
Michelle,
with.
you're in the next box, at least on my screen. I don't know how much that means.
It's valid to me since I'm the next one. I some slow progress. I worked with Mia on the income financial statement y'all are building. And I've noticed with the income stuff in general, with the more complex stuff, the itemized job stuff, sometimes the questions we have built in as default questions are interfering more than I've seen other basic questions and kind of shared questions interfere with what people want to do. People tend to do, I've seen people do very different things. So everybody seems to be approaching it in a very different way. I don't know if that points to a need to like maybe have a panel where we get together and discuss what's best practices, or if that means like removing some default questions so people just define their own, or if that means people feel ways about it, certainly. Or if that means a bit more documentation or some more examples, recipes, or what. But I'm just saying what I've noticed over time. Yes, and the other thing is it's not relevant to most people, but trying to parse what's in the DOM, trying to get rid of the decoding cycle, which I really don't like. That builds up those guesses in ALKiln. Don't worry if you don't know what I'm saying, but I have actually found great I think promising things for multi-select and object multi-select, but object radio and maybe radio are actually the ones missing full information on the page. And I'm just trying to find where I can get that information. So if anyone has ideas, which this is probably too unclear to give me ideas right now, but or is willing to discuss more or brainstorm, let me know. Because it would be nice to get rid of some of the code that I just on a gut level feel is fragile and prone to breaking from possible future updates, like like one of the object created inputs did with when Jonathan added the O to the encoding. Nobody knows what I'm talking about. All right.
I kind of know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But carry on. Next.
Yeah, just a quick thought. I like the idea of having multiple examples, but I think probably Bryce's reaction was it should work out of the box to do something, because that's usually better than nothing. It may be really hard for people to figure out how to
I think
write your questions.
if we had a better idea of when things were not being overridden as they should, that might help for like documentation and stuff, because I think documentation is the better idea. And I have my guess is that it has something to do with like DocAssemble has weird rules about like what gets overridden if it's like a generic object and which part is generic. And I don't know exactly what those rules are because it gets really complicated. And so maybe just having, if it's like, okay, we have a specific example of, I wrote this thing, like I overrode this question. I should be using mine, but it's still using the existing one. Then we could be like, okay, this is an example of like, it's DocAssemble's doing XYZ and using that version instead of something else. But I don't know what exactly all those rules are, because it feels like it should be simple, and it's like, oh, you use the variable that matches the closest. You would use like users 0 over users I, but what does it start doing when you start doing a very specific like sub object of that thing? Does it use the attribute version? Does it use the whole thing? What if it's generic? Like, I don't know if there are concrete written out rules for all of that.
We could possibly reduce things and make them as generic as possible to make them very easy to override is probably one good step to address some of this.
But that's children thing, didn't we?
But it wouldn't be sufficient for at least one of the problems we faced. So
yeah, I mean, it might help to know like a little bit more details. I could probably ask Mia too. This is for
I have a very specific thing in mind and I can outline it, but
Is it
I
like
don't
an
wanna
index
take up the
number
whole
like there was
time.
for children between like there was a special case for 0 and we could have combined it into one question instead?
No, it was a case where the to subtract dictionary was empty, but we knew that we wanted state and federal taxes. We had a question asking for the existence of and the value of state and federal taxes, but because they were not on the object yet, were not in the dictionary yet, the question that got asked instead was our default question of what is another deduction you have, where it was the new item question. So what we had to do was initialize federal taxes and state taxes into the to subtract dictionary, and then the correct question got triggered.
I thought that was already in there.
Yeah, it definitely seems a little different from the first description of it, the problem. It's more just maybe it's just
Well, it
documenting how to
wasn't,
provide some certain really common choices that people might have, or deciding if we wanted to always turn some of those on. It could be like maybe having commented out blocks, like if you always want to ask about common things on someone's pay stub, uncomment this. I don't know, but it's not really a matter of like the default overriding it to me. That's a little just different description, but
I didn't say the default overriding it. I said that the default questions were confusing because if it hadn't had that, then we would have had to define from scratch. Whereas because it appeared, it caused confusion about what exactly was needing to be defined, right? Instead of saying this thing isn't defined, I don't know. Instead of DocAssemble having that error, it instead had the, the question, which was unclear about what it was that we had left undefined, right? So
Yes,
it
we could
wasn't
think
about the
about-
default, it was about the default question being there, leaving out clues that could have otherwise been helpful in the situation.
But in this case, like someone could, yeah, I do think we've talked a little bit before about ways to give more help on like people's development servers as to where the question's coming from and why. But you kind of have to learn it for each new package. Maybe we should come up with some way like, hey, we're always going to show this on the side, and it's only going to be a sidebar that appears if there's a debug setting on the server is enabled, something like that. I don't really know. But the problem is like any of those, you can't really say use ours unless the other one's defined. Like, I guess you could. I guess it would just be overridden by whatever the person happened to put there.
Well, the problem is that nothing was there. That's why it was confusing, because nothing was there. And so something, but it wasn't clear that something needed to be there in order to prevent this question from appearing. I can
get that that's
I can
like the mental
actually-
model people have of it, but it's not really what happened, right? Like what happened is there wasn't anything defined there, so it went through the normal list gathering. But what someone might have expected was there's some things predefined because they're like always on a paycheck. So we can either always predefine those or we can document it. But I don't think putting an error would help people understand it
I don't
better.
think Mia expected them to be predefined. That wasn't the expectation she came in with, from what I could tell. But I hear you. Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where like when you're learning a new package, you have to figure out, well, where do I learn this? And do you learn it from the overview? That could be an easy place, like say, hey, here's 5 common situations. You maybe even start with just 2 common situations that we document. Like, here's how to configure it for this thing.
For sure.
Or we have some new way to surface information when people use the package, which I think is an interesting idea. Students who are learning our other assembly line stuff would probably benefit from it. If there were new ways to surface like just-in-time explanations of how our code works, and we could extend it to this package too. But I think just like not defining stuff and having errors isn't probably. I know that that was just one suggestion you had, and I know I don't want to get stuck on it, but we probably want to avoid that solution, I think, if we can.
Sure.
But
Like
it's
you said, it
interesting.
was just one suggestion. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not trying to identify you really strongly with that idea, just saying, like,
Okay.
it seems like
Sure.
it's a good idea. And as we're talking about it, I'm thinking, let's come up with an idea that basically improves documentation is what I see the need is.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like that.
With recipes and examples.
Yeah.
That's always so helpful.
Yeah. Like I said, that's it for me. That's all I got. Yeah.
Great. Bryce.
I don't really have anything. Went through a lot of my notes today and made some issues. That's it. So
Thanks for all the work that you've done on this project, Bryce.
Yeah. Thanks.
Even after
Bye.
you really officially left, it's still doing stuff for Michigan, but it's helping our bigger project. So hopefully we'll still get to see you.
when
Some days. Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
Any other closing questions or thoughts or anything else to share?
Is there a regular stand-up Monday? We have that off. Forgot if we
Mhm.
talked about it last week.
There won't be one this Monday. No one. I'm okay day.
Okay. Thanks.